Good morning, everybody. So today I am going to be summarizing a little bit about the text I looked at from the Bitter Southerner, which was The Cost of Living High. I kind of was looking for something relating to substance abuse, and I just feel like that's something we've seen in quite a few of the novels, including but not limited to, of course, Mostly Dead Things, which we are finishing up, and definitely in Cruise's Florida Frenzy. I'm going to get into those a little bit more, but here's some of the high notes of the text itself. It was definitely unexpectedly positive. For talking about such a heavy and life changing and life taking um, thing, it was really, really positive in its connotation. Um, and it mostly focused on the recovery aspects of recovering substance abuse users and education and again that road to recovery was definitely focused on that and impacts to careers, positive impacts after recovery had started. So it kind of followed the story of Elisha Jones throughout, and it does take breaks throughout and adds smaller tidbits and statistics and whatnot throughout. But it does primarily follow him rising to fame and kind of when things started to go downhill in his youth, and then he got very, very addicted to drugs, especially on the road so much. And kind of implied, or not even implied, it actually says that in the music industry, being on drugs or associated very closely with it is expected, which I thought was a really crazy thing to say. And again, it literally says it's expected. So, definitely that big connection with the music industry. Um, and there's very, very heavy testimony on how drugs had impacted lives, but then once they got on that road to recovery, that their careers kind of took off even more so. So at first, it's kind of like an expectation, and then it moves on to um, a necessity, but then it starts damaging careers, and then once they get onto the road to recovery, they are much more famous, much more popular. Their music is better, their career is better. Um, but there's tons and tons of testimony, and it kind of goes back and forth between Elisha Jones's story and other famous people in the industry. And it talks a lot about a recovery house, especially towards the middle and the end of the text. Um, can't think of the name of it offhand. I wish I would have written it down, but I didn't. Um, but it does focus on one particular company, MusiCares, and how that particular company funded this particular rehabilitation center and helped a lot of musicians kind of get better and do better. The text does focus on, again, a lot of those statistics about substance abuse, um, not only in the music industry, but also in society as a whole. And of course, music is very relative to society because they're going to be, talking about things that are in society that are troublesome, that are not. Um, but so it's very related because of that. And it does make a bigger point about it getting out of hand, because it says that there's a 5% increase from the year it talks about that particular statistic. I want to say it was 2014 it had done that statistic, and of course, this being several years later, we can almost assume that that implies that the 5% has grown um, even more so in the past several years. And it talks about there being 21.5 million people who are struggling with substance abuse issues, and I want to say that was over the U.S. I don't think that was global. I could be wrong, but again, bad note taking on my part. But it did talk about 21.5 million people being affected by substance abuse. Um, And they talk about it being a reoccurring issue not only for the individual, but for society, which kind of shows some trends. And I think those trends do show up in at least 3 of the texts we've read so far. First, Florida Frenzy, we definitely see Cruz in the nonfiction portions. He drinks heavily. Especially in the first couple of stories, we were introduced to people who drink a lot. They go to bars a lot. They do that, and it's like a social experience. But at the same time, they're drinking on a very regular basis, which I forget what the actual parameters for alcoholism are. But I know it's like having either like the binge drinking aspect, drinking several in a short amount of time, or like having alcohol like I think it's at least once a day, you have to have it almost, which it does seem like Cruz does. It does seem like he does that in quite a few of the stories, but definitely in that nonfiction section. Mostly Dead Things, of course. The father, Jessa, and her brother are all constantly drinking beer, which, of course, beer isn't that, potent as an alcohol, but of course it is alcoholic, and that's what it seems like a lot of stories we hear about alcoholism, it's heavy on the beer. And in Annihilation, we see our main character, the biologist, talking about experiences where she was heavily drinking on a regular basis, and she gets so, out of control drunk, and then she almost injures herself at the, oh goodness, was it the pool? There was like a lake that she was studying, and she almost got herself injured there, and she got really drawn in by that particular, I think it was a jellyfish or a snail, something that was glowing biofluorescent, and it really just drew her in. And of course, I'm sure the alcohol had a little bit of fun with that one. And I'm also going to propose that Swamplandia as well has a little bit of a connection with that. Because it's talking about a lot of these people having, mental health issues or other kind of issues that kind of lead to this substance abuse. I'm going to say this could potentially, if there was a part 2 to Swamplandia, the main character could be at risk for something like that with having a major trauma in her childhood. It could lead to potential substance abuse, and of course not diagnosing or anything, but it seems fair that having such a crazy event happen in her childhood and not getting any kind of counseling or help about it could lead to some kind of things of that nature. So that's 3 for sure, and then of course Swamplandia being the 4th, and I think that's kind of again a little bit of a if you kind of projected that out, what would that look like? So it definitely said in the article that being on the road was one of the key parts, not being close to people, necessarily your family. Of course, people on the road become your family, but, being in different places every night, staying at different places, having that kind of substance readily available, and the loneliness of it all, being on the road and being lonely. They mark as one of the causes or the things that kind of get you stuck in that lifestyle of substance abuse. And it said it did completely affect the way that they created music. It affected the way they interacted with other people. And they definitely said that it affected their careers in negative ways, not positive ways. And they said specifically that young artists or youth are at risk for this kind of behavior, not so much older ones, but then again, it could be that older people are already affected. That's where they get started. They weren't clear on that point, but they definitely did say that young artists were at risk more so. And then it went into some statistics about 25 to 30% of music. I want to say that was in 2016 that they had mentioned that. That studies had shown that 25 to 30%, depending on the genre, of course, had a mention of one type of substance or another being used, which I think is a crazy number, that more than a fourth of music is talking about those kinds of issues, which if that's not a trend, I don't know what is. And again, I think we're seeing that in literature as well, especially coming from the Florida perspective that we're seeing that in, again, if I'm arguing out of the 5 novels we read, that 4 of them are applicable. That's that's a huge percent, and I think that we should probably take that as, some kind of trend, or at least make a note that it's there, it exists. Um, Finally, talks about the pressures um, on these musicians to kind of, you know, be into the substance abuse and all this kind of stuff, and um, the usage just kind of being because of the pressure they're, under to perform, and also to, um, be liked by the people that they are performing for, because of course popularity, you have to be liked. And I think a lot of that may have stemmed from them just wanting to be successful, want to be liked, to be, famous. But as much as it does talk about all these negative things, again, I did mention that it's very overall positive. It focused a lot on the fact that they are educating people, and that they are focused on recovery. But I almost see this text as kind of like a warning piece. We're putting a spotlight on substance abuse and alcoholism and other drug use. So saying that, if we can do it in the music industry, we should be able to do it in other industries, because it's not just in the music industry, but it is very prevalent. And I think that's potentially what some of these authors are doing as well, focusing on the fact that in Florida, maybe this is an issue, or in contemporary society, that it's very prevalent. So that kind of leads me to my first question. Is this putting a light on what will become not just a music industry problem or must, but other industries as well, like societal industries, or society must? So is this a focus on alcoholism and the signs of it? Is it depicting this issue in the 3 texts that I mentioned, for sure, and of course potentially Swamplandia, if it were, progressed out, if there was a part 2. Also, it made me kind of think of, do you think that authors are trying to do this? Do you think they're trying to put a spotlight on it? Do you think they're trying to bring that to our attention, or is this just normal for them? Are these people just writing about Florida and that's just part of it? Or are they trying to kind of say, hey, mental health is a problem, alcoholism and other substance abuse problems are an issue? So, here's a little bit of a spotlight moment for them to kind of, picture it, see it, and, notice it's a problem, so it gets more attention, so it gets more help just in general from society. And then my third question, what does this say about the South, in particular Florida, about substance abuse and about alcoholism? And does that say we're doing something? Does it say we're not doing something? And I don't really know what the answer is for that, but what does that say about Florida and the South? Again, we're known for those kinds of behaviors, partying hard, right? So those are some of my questions. That's kind of the summary / explanation for how this might be connected with what we've been discussing. A little bit more than 5 to 7 minutes. Sorry about that. But I just wanted to make sure that I got everything out there and was clear. So yeah, I look forward to hearing everybody's thoughts and whatnot. See you guys.